Hello, you're listening to the Neil Lamptey Show. My name's Joey, and I'm joined by Paul.
All right, buddy.
And Neil.
Hello.
I'm going to start this week with an opening question from Tom Alves. Hi, Tom, if you're listening. In the dream world where we made the greatest of great escapes, how would you celebrate? This based, no doubt, on the fact that Mark Robins is trying everything he can to get us out of this relegation mire that we're definitely going to do. Should he be successful in it, though, how would you celebrate? Neil, what would you do?
Oh, yeah, I'm so conflicted with this one. I want to be that guy who just sits down like I always am and I'm just angry. Even if we got out of it, I'll just be angry. But knowing me, I will be ever so happy and probably want to go out and get a Mark Robins tattoo. So the problem is, it's just so inexplicable. I can't even conceive it. I can't even imagine a world where we can get out of this, even if we win everything. I was trying the other day with a predictor to come up with any sort of sequence of events that would lead to us staying up. And I managed it once. And it was just, it's incredible that we could even conceive it. But yes, please make it happen.
Didn't Chesterfield win on Saturday?
Yeah, and that's where it gets confusing because they're having to. You look at teams and you're like, oh, actually, Port Vale are down there, so we want them to win. And I'm like, oh, actually, hang on, no, they're playing this team who are down there as well, and that's where the confusion is because you've got Swindon playing other teams, and it has to be the absolute perfect sequence of events, and then we have to win 4 as well.
I actually call them Swindon because they're
Swindon,
such a bunch of swines. Paul, what would you do?
It's just not going to happen, so I don't even consider it as an option, to be honest.
And you're not a man for celebration at the best of times, are you? Even with this, possible scenario.
No, it's just, as I said, the same way Neil Hart. You look at the 3 teams who would have to lose, and that's 3 teams would have to lose all 4 games because our goal difference is so shit, and all 3 of those 3 teams are all at home in their next games and all playing teams they shouldn't lose against. So I don't think once every team's on 47, I'm going to give up.
I don't think you've approached this question in the jocular nature that it was intended.
I feel like we've actively ignored the nature of it. With in the dream world, that beginning sort of sets us up to dream, but we're not.
But we don't dream, do we? We dream about other things. We don't. It's just like it's. I mean, obviously,
I'd love to see
my moment of the week is. I just don't know whether to be really happy about the fact we keep winning, or just really fucking annoyed that we're dragging this out even longer.
Hey, drag it out.
But it's so frustrating, isn't it? Because it's like I said, you still got hope. I've still bothered to see who the teams are playing against, because to some extent, obviously we have to win all 4, but we're relying on 3 teams or 4 teams failing to pick up any more points. 4 teams who are fighting relegation themselves to not even pick up a point. It's just like, it's inconceivable. And it's just like when the penalty, you're like, I want Burge to save this. And Burge saves it, you're like, yes. And then, we go on, we win the game, you're like, yes. Shit, I've got to come back next Friday.
Are you really like this? Are you genuinely cross that we're still not down?
Because it's so improbable that if we won all 4 games, we would definitely stay up. I know it's unlikely, but if it was sort of there were 4 games left and we had to win 3 of them to stay up, I'd be like, yes. As we've got 4 games left, we have to win all 4, and 3 teams can't even pick up a point. Yeah, I just want it to be over. Because we could get to that point where we could get 47 points, we could win all 4 games, and then get relegated on goal difference.
That made last year a little bit better, though, didn't it?
But our goal, because once those teams get to 47, the swing of goals would and considering I think we've had 8 games under Mark Robins, we've scored 4 goals. We have to make up, even to the poorest team, like a 10-goal swing.
That's normal, though. You're going to make up 8 goals regardless. You'll make up 8 at minimum. They have to lose all 4 games by a minimum of a goal. We have to win by plus a goal. That's 8 goals straight off, isn't it?
Isn't that 4?
No, it's because they lose 4 and we add 4 to ours.
Let's drag this on. Neil, what was your moment of the week?
Not to do maths, but I'm just saying that's how it works, isn't it? It's a swing. We'd go to.
But if they lost each, they're plus. It's not going to happen.
I completely understand that. I think I like winning more than I do like us losing, regardless.
Neil, that's fine. I just want this season to be over. As I said, it's just like it is getting to the point where. And it's also frustrating because you're watching, you're like, well, this team shouldn't be bottom.
This weekend.
This team clearly shouldn't be. If we hadn't have had Russell Slade, we wouldn't be here.
Let's move this forward. Neil, moment of the week.
Twist and shout. What was it? 15 minutes of just singing that song? That's support for you. I know it's inane and it doesn't do anything, but bloody hell, it feels good just for everybody just to be happy in the stand. And everybody just to make that noise and to look across to the away fans. And they're all sat there gawping at you thinking, what is wrong with this team? They're bottom of the league and the fans are singing like lunatics. It was brilliant.
I wasn't there on Saturday, but I saw a Peterborough fan tweet something along the lines of Cov fans have been singing Twist and Shout for 15 minutes now, getting boring. And I was like, I bet it ain't. Yeah, boring for you. My moment of the week is a sad one, unfortunately, is just watching the score updates against Sheffield United and the crushing inevitability of a John Fleck assist to Leon Clark and then Leon Clark scoring. And I think some people have tried to make a sort of grander sweeping statement about what it means and everything, but I don't know. I just thought, oh man. Okay, we're going to briefly none of us were at the Sheffield United game, but we're going to do a sort of ersatz review of the game by asking you lot to provide one-line sentences that sum the game up. So here's just a handful of these before we move on to the Peterborough review. Callum Hands, I booted a Fanta when Fleck scored and got told to calm down by a steward and that I'd been caught on CCTV. A painful ordeal in all. Held our own 70 minutes, but confidence disintegrated after Sheffield United scored. Nathan Clark watch, still shit. That was someone on Twitter called Post Truth James, who I thought you'd appreciate, Paul. Yeah, that's the chuckle that I'm after.
Also, if you're off, not that we do this sort of thing, but if you're off after bespoke artwork, have a look at Post Truth James' artwork. He's a very, very good illustrator. I
think it's at RT Fufkin on Twitter, which I assume is is it, what's the film, King of Comedy? Is that his name in that?
Yes.
Anyway, that's yeah. And then final one that we've got is in fact no, it's not. Oh, anyway, it doesn't matter. Final one that we've got from our friends over at the Football Attic is didn't go, never happened. Which I think we can all enjoy. Paul, have you got any comments on the Sheffield United game, or should we move straight on to Peterborough?
Saw the team, glad I didn't bother going.
A level of brevity not commonplace in your analysis, Paul.
You can have more. Obviously, you can always have more, but I don't think anyone. I think everyone knows once they look at a team with Marcus Guy up front, Foley in midfield, we're going to lose. Why worry about it?
Yeah, and I think you're probably. I mean, of all the games this season where you're on a hiding to nothing, the game after Wembley away at top of the league, I think that one was written in the stars, wasn't it? Okay, but we had much greater fortunes against Peterborough, Neil. What happened?
Yeah, we returned to a more familiar lineup, which was helpful. There were some additions to the team, namely Foley at right back, which on the face of it, you look at it and you think, why are we doing this? But and I'm putting this button here just for Mark Robinson's sake. He's trying to win games of football, and if he feels like having four tall people at the back works for him, I'll go with that. I think ultimately, Kelly Evans hasn't had a bad game for us yet, so he's worthy of his place in the team. But I'm not really one to whinge about people if they come in and we win games like we did. So it was a real. I've said it before already, but it was a really sort of conflicting game because now I've seen this over the last few weeks. My sort of approach to watching this has changed slightly, and while we were losing every game, and I looked at it and just thought we were crap, so I didn't really expect much. Now I watch us, and having seen good goals from George Thomas and good periods of play in the previous matches, I do expect a little bit more. And of people like Carl Reid, having seen his performances in recent weeks, I expect a lot more of him than we got on Saturday. And he had a particularly poor game. And it's one of those where you wonder whether it's just him returning to type or whether his legs just weren't quite in it, because he had sort of lead legs and he just couldn't take his player on at all, it was surreal, and he actually got hauled off at half time. I mean,
talking of surreal things,
yes,
I'm going to leap to Carl Reid's defence here. I don't think he was fit, to be honest.
That's my point, yeah.
He missed the Sheffield United game, and you could just tell that there wasn't anything there. There just wasn't any energy in those legs. And
he didn't trust himself, though, did he? He didn't trust himself to take anybody. Normally, he'd be knocking it around him, and it was just looking backwards. It was surreal to watch. Yeah,
I think you just put that down to the fact I think he was taken off because he just wasn't fit. I think I can understand from Robin's point of view why he probably wanted Carl Reid on the pitch, but in the same way, when Jordan Willis went off against Sheffield United, and you read it, you were like, Jordan Willis had to go off at Wembley because he wasn't fit. I don't see how he could have made that remarkable recovery between Sunday and Wednesday that he's starting again. And Carl Reid was limping after Wembley as well. And you just, obviously we're not privy to what the injuries are, but when Carl Reid didn't come out in the second half, you were like, well, that explains the first half for me.
Yeah, it's just
to type, to be fair.
And that's kind of the problem, isn't it? Because you see him in the team and you kind of then expect, well, he's fit. And then you see the performance and you think, oh, it's just frustrating, because actually I saw the game when I was watching it it was just such an opportunity, because Peterborough was so open, and just we had so many chances to sort of attack them and exploit gaps, and he wasn't taking them. It was actually a hindrance for only being a right back, because he was getting so much space, and he's not an attacking player, so he wasn't able to make any use of it. And the first half was actually pretty frustrating for me, just watching it and seeing the amount of opportunities we had to do something with the ball, and whether it was a sloppy pass from Biggie or just a miscontrol from Haynes or something like that. And it was these little moments where, because we'd seen them play so well recently, you'd expect those bits to come normally or naturally to them, and that wasn't happening. And that first half, it was a frustration more than anything else, because it wasn't dreadful, but there was so much more in there. We didn't exploit it. And Robin said after the game, he was talking about being clinical and just making the most of the opportunities. And we certainly didn't do that in the first half, because there were chances for us to kind of create in that half, and we just didn't do it. And Biggie in particular had a really odd performance, because he's a weird one, because he seems to play better when he's kind of on edge, and when he tries to do this thing where he's really relaxed and just tried to give this sort of facade of being calm on the ball, he just loses his concentration, and he's almost too lax. And that's what he was doing the other day. He was just first half especially, he was just too lax. And then I think something just came over him, and he realised, actually, I need to get my head right here. And he picked it up again, and he started to sort of throw himself into those tackles and wind himself up a bit. And then the performances came for him, and it's strange, because I can see what he's trying to do. He wants to be in control of the entire match and in control of himself, but actually, just lose it, Biggie. I think that's the advice. Just lose it. Do what you did in that final. Whenever you have a good game, it's when you're absolutely flying and just nipping at everybody.
When Neil says lose it, what he doesn't mean, Biggie, is the ball continuously to the opposition.
Yeah, no, I saw you'd got some choice words for Biggie, hadn't you, Paul, post game?
First half, there were. I said to the people we stand with, the first half, there are some players I really like. I like Haynes. He was awful first half. I've had a bit of a renaissance with Turnbull. He was pretty shoddy first half. And Biggie was the worst of the lot first half. Not one of those three seemed to be able to do anything right. And it wasn't through, one lack of effort or anything. It was just they were having bad halves.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of what Neil said. I mean, Peterborough basically played 3-5-2, which meant Haynes and Foley had a lot of time on the ball, but also everyone seemed to have a lot. Considering they had three in midfield, Biggie and Stevenson seemed to have a lot of time on the ball. Lemaire's had a lot of time on the ball in between the midfield and the defence. So Peterborough were very strange because they had three at the back and were basically only marking Bevan. It was a very strange game of football from that point of view. But yeah, Biggie, those three, all of them, just didn't seem to get going in the first half. Obviously, the main thing that happened in the first half, apart from about Ruben Lemaire's about 18 shots, did you think it was a penalty, Neil?
Oh, it's such a tricky one. I think what caused the penalty was the fact that Biggie flying through the back of him, and it just made it look worse than it was. I even now looking at it again, I can't call it. I feel like I can see why he gave it, but it was made worse just by the fact that Biggie was doing his lunacy again, wasn't he?
Well, I thought it was. For me, Turnbull he knocked the ball in the gap between, I think, Turnbull and Clark, and from what I saw straight away was Turnbull basically just stepped across him.
That was the foul. That was what looked like the foul. Yeah.
And it was like, and I think someone on CWR the phone went, well, none of the Peterboroughs claimed the penalty, and you were like, well, none of them claimed it because they probably did what I did. Was when he went to the ground, they looked straight at the referee. And the referee, within seconds, was pointing to the spot. They didn't need to claim it because the referee. It was one of those ones where it was. We had a perfect view of it, and as soon as it happened, it was like penalty. And you were like, if that had been Bevan running into the box and we hadn't been awarded it, you'd be going ape shit. It was one of the clearest penalties I've seen for a while, where you were just like, where's the ref? What's the ref doing? Oh, he's pointing to the spot.
Were you near it? Were you behind it, or?
Yeah, it was the other end of the pitch, but it was directly in my line of sight. So,
have you seen the highlight? Have you seen the highlights of it?
Yeah, and I still think Turnbull just steps across him, and basically he might be looking for it, but I just think Turnbull, because he's not near the ball, as soon as he makes that step across, it's going to be a penalty.
Well, yeah, as long as he's touched him, it's really difficult to tell from the highlights whether he's actually touched him or not. If he's even touched him remotely, then it's an absolute stick-on penalty, isn't it? But it's very, very tough to tell. Anyway, carry on.
So yeah, and then Burge saved it, which was fantastic. And there seems to be a lot of love for Burge at the moment, which I'm all in favour of.
Goes to show what we're like, though. I mean, only 3 weeks ago, we were, people were writing him off as a keeper, just saying, okay, this guy, he's not for us. And yet, a couple of games later, pulls off some saves, kicks straight. There we go. We've got a keeper again. It is balmy. I mean, I think we, on this show at least, all agree he's got these sort of requisite attributes as a keeper. He's strong. I think he's solid with the ball in his hands. Yeah, kicking needs some work, obviously, but he already, you can watch him now. He thinks he's a goalie again. He made that save. He's in charge again, and it's going to be hard for Charles Cook to find his way back into the team while Burgess doing this. So yeah, I'm pleased for him because it just seems like we have to find someone to have a go at, and he had a bad game. But the problem is he was playing in a team where everybody was having a bad game, and the only problem is when your goalie has a bad game, your goalie lets in goals or just doesn't kick straight and stuff like that, and it's just far too noticeable.
Before we go off Burge, we were discussing this during the game, and I think Pritchard make a really relevant point. This season, because we've had chopping and changing of the players, like we started off with Reece Charles Cook, and Burge got in. Your first 10 games, like in any position, you tend to be a bit nervous. And obviously, if you're a keeper and you're nervous, it shows more than you've got nowhere to hide. You can hide in other players. Other players, other positions allow you to sort of go a bit more into your shell. But obviously, a goalkeeper is very difficult. But also with Burge, it's sort of once you sort of got into position, we then changed the manager, and you have to sort of prove yourself again. So once you'd sort of got in under Slade, then Mark Robbins came in, and it's back to square one. You need to impress a new manager, and I think. And someone made a comment on, again, CWL. It's like, always thought we needed an experienced goalkeeper. But now Burge has played like 70 games. And you're like, well, that's what we talk about all the time. Like, players, every position, need games to develop. Some players take to it quicker than others. we've seen with George Thomas, it's taken him probably, 40 games to get to the level where you're like, yeah, I trust you now. And not only that, you trust yourself. It's the same with Burge. And Burge has had some of the wildest variations of some of the players we've ever seen, going from the sending off against Walsall, Worcester, and some of the other things that have gone on with Burge. It's not been a smooth, easy progression into the team. So I think the fact he's come out the other side, and even people who are sort of dismissing him are now coming around, you're like, well, fair play to him. But that's, to some extent, how you have to treat every youngster that's coming through. Not all of them are going to be like some of the... We've been blessed with some of the youngsters we've had recently who have come in and looked to the manner born. But we are where we are. We're bottom of League One. We're about to go into League Two. We have to accept that some of our youngsters might take a little bit longer, because the issue now is Burge is out of contract. So by the time we've finally got Burge up to the point where you think, yeah, this guy's first choice, he's probably going to leave in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, another player who second half came in and showed a completely different side to what we'd seen recently was Jody Jones. Came in for a read and he seems happy. He seems happy to play football. It's such a balmy transformation, really. When you see someone who previously didn't want the ball, who's kind of, felt like... I just looked at him and thought, he's worried about people booing him and all that sort of stuff. And now he's just dead on it again, getting the ball, running with it. And it was just... Second half was different because they did step up the game and it was still open and there were still so many chances. And I was still frustrated because we weren't kind of doing anything with those chances. But I was never really worried. I wasn't worried that we were going to lose that game. I just felt like we were, even if we conceded, there was just so many opportunities to do something with it. And if we had conceded, we would have probably gone up the other end and scored again. And Lemire seems to be a favourite at the moment. And it was a good goal. And that guy never seems to strike a ball sort of cleanly. It felt like a little bit of, not a pure scuff like his normal shots, but it wasn't, the best strike of the ball, but it was right in the corner and he got himself his goal. And from that point onwards, it was just, I'm going to say plain sailing. And I don't know why I'm saying it, but I think that's why we were all singing and we were just kind of all enjoying ourselves, because it wasn't the sort of game where you felt like they were going to cause as much of an issue. The only one who really, from their side, was the short, stocky guy, Marias, up front in the second half. He caused us a bit of an issue, and I thought Paul Taylor, when he came on as well, he looks pretty good for him. I don't know why they don't play him more often, to be honest. But other than that, I think we calmed ourselves in the second half. We weren't clinical at all. There were plenty of times when we could have, we were about 3-on-2 and we just made wrong decisions with the passes. But ultimately, it didn't really matter. Well, Bevan had another fantastic sort of game up front where he was just working them. And what I love about him is that even when he knows he's not going to win the header, he's still challenging for the header. He's still making their defender, who was an absolute brute, by the way, that big hairy oaf. He was hard work, but Bevan was evolved. He got a few whacks on the head for his troubles, but he's always making them think, and that's such a big difference compared to someone like early in the season when we had old Agyai, who, if he wasn't getting the ball, he wasn't challenging for it. You're just giving people an easy ride, and Bevan doesn't give anybody an easy ride. So, no, I mean, fair play to him. I thought ultimately in the second half they turned the performance around. They stabilised it. They weren't quite as shaky. They got the goal that they needed and probably could have got more. And I guess ultimately the frustration is going to be for nothing. But that's not to say we shouldn't go into the next game trying to get that win again and just sort of building. Like Robin says, constantly improve, constantly start to feel good as a team and build for next season, because that's what we're doing. We're preparing for next year.
Yeah, unfortunately. Paul, any final thoughts before we move on?
Obviously, we didn't talk about Bevan's overhead kick in the first half, which hit the post.
Oh, God, yes.
Beauty.
Gosh, that was good.
Well, basically, the ball was pinging around the penalty area, and Bevan did an overhead kick and hit the post from about 8-10 yards out. It was one of those ones, as soon as you hit it, you were almost like just about to celebrate, because their goalkeeper, you knew their keeper wasn't going to get near it. And then it hit the post, and you were like, that was almost an awesome goal. And I think a lot of credit's got to go to Ruben Ramirez, who he the way he plays really benefits Bevan, I think. And also, I think we talked about this with Ruben Ramirez, is he needs runners off him. So I think he obviously clearly likes playing with George Thomas because he gets the ball and he's permanently on the half turn and he's permanently looking for players to release. So with George Thomas going from deep and Bevan's just work rate, he's always got people to use either with the ball or to create space for him by dragging people away. And Peterborough, considering they're playing 3 in midfield and 3 centre-halves, never quite got to grips with him all game. And I said in the first half he had about 4 or 5, as Neil correctly says, sort of just... He has a really strange technique where he can't quite seem to wrap his foot around it. He doesn't hit it nicely. It's always a bit like he's a bit nervous about striking the ball cleanly.
Robbins picked up on that, didn't he, as well, after the game? Did you hear his post-match?
I only heard the very end of it.
Yeah, he said exactly that. He said Ruben's got this thing where he's almost committed himself to shooting. So even if he's off balance or he's not quite set for the shot, he's going to shoot. And they've been trying to sort of drill it into him to sort of kind of make smarter decisions and set himself better and that sort of stuff. And you can see that. That's why he doesn't quite strike them well enough, because he'll do that thing where he will eventually find the opening, but usually by that point he's kind of stretched himself and he'll just sort of trickle it along the ground because he doesn't quite have the power in his legs.
I mean, I'd love to be at Brighton and give Foley and Ramirez a ball to run after, because I think that'll be the slowest race ever. Bless them, neither of those two have got pace. Like at one point, Ramirez went down the wing with George Thomas in the middle, and George Thomas released him, and you were like, "This just isn't going to work." Ramirez just doesn't have that. It's not even like he's got like the old Mickey Quinn thing. Oh, I'm the fastest over 3 yards. Ramirez is bloody slow over 3 yards. He's just got nothing about him, and that's going to hinder his career. I know everyone talks about him being lightweight. I think you can sort of get away with. He's tricky enough that he does win free kicks and he does cause havoc, but just being so slow at times is a real hindrance. So yeah, I thought Stevenson had quite a good game. When Callum Riley came on, the first thing he did was let the ball go into his foot, which was hilarious.
Can we go back to Ramirez for a second?
Yeah.
I think is it going to hinder him, or is it just that he needs to be playing in a system where he can be accommodated like that? Because I thought it was interesting. I saw what he said after the game, and he said that playing number 10, which is what he considers to be what he's playing at the moment, is his natural position. And he said, things are being made really easy for me at the moment because I've got Bevan, who's just so intelligent. And he said by the end of the game on Saturday, he's got George Thomas and Jody Jones who are running ahead of him. And actually, I don't think you need to be a wildly pacey player to sit in that and be the fulcrum of those players moving around you. I think there's plenty of players that have been. I know we always have to give the caveat that we're not saying as good as these players, but Rafael van der Vaart couldn't move 5 yards, could he? But he just he was just effective because that's the type of player he was.
Even van der Vaart could break away from the first challenge. I mean, I'm not saying he has to be Theo Walcott quick. He just has to be faster than me.
I'm not saying that.
He's just not.
He's not that slow, is he? He's not as slow as you're making up, isn't it?
He is. It's so noticeable. It's just clearly not. He just can't break that. He can't break past that first man because he doesn't have that pace.
I'm gonna have to be on YouTube after this.
That's fine. I mean, obviously there are other things that are going to hinder his career. The fact he's not that good, and he hasn't played. He's only started 19 games this season, which sounds a lot, but when you think we've lost 20, it's not that many. He hasn't, even this season, you can say the manager was shit. Slade wouldn't play him. So, and he's out of contract at the end of the season, and he's barely played, he hasn't really, over 2 years at Cov, made a massive impact. You could say last season it was because there were better players than him. This season, I think, obviously he needs a manager who trusts him, but are we going to take him into League Two next season? That's a big question. I think Robbins he's using him a lot at the moment, but would he be in a team if Kwame Thomas was fit? I've got nothing against Ruben Ramirez, but I think we've also got to accept the fact that he's a big question mark for next season. Is he going to be able to cope in League Two with the rough and tumble? It's a big question mark. He had a good game once. He's had the last 2 games I've seen him. He's had good games. He was one of the main attacking threats we had. But you've got to think that people like Ramirez, if he's going to play that sort of number 10 role, he's got to be wading in with like 10 to 15 goals. Is he going to wade in with that many? I think he scored 3 for us since he's been here.
I think it's funny that he is a player that you're nominally in favour of, but that if he was listening to your appraisal of him there, he'd probably throw himself off a bridge.
Well, but that's the reality of the situation, isn't it? I mean, it's something we discuss this a lot. All of our players have certain weaknesses. That's why they're at COV, because they're obviously not top quiet players, or they're not even top players, or even good players, because they're at COV. So the questions, and I had a discussion with people on Twitter. It's like, are his negatives more or less than his positives? His positives are, he's one of the only players who can really pick an attacking pass. He's very intelligent, and he's got good movement, and he does make your team more attractive to watch. On the negative side, away from home, he can disappear. He is physically weak. He's not particularly quick to compensate for that physical weakness, and he's never really been able to hold a place in the first team.
I would say he is someone I would like to see playing for us next season, but as you say, whether that will happen or whether he will make the sort of the physical upgrade to League 2, who knows. Okie doke, thank you both. Right, we're going to move on and drop in a quick chat that I had with Dominic Jerams, who's Sideways Sammy. He gave us some Rochdale and Charlton preview. Here we go. So, Dominic, thanks for joining us. Questions then. So we've got 2 games coming up. First of all, Charlton. Charlton have been rubbish this season, haven't they? But they find themselves in a position similar-ish to us, where they've got a lot of protests going on, a lot of noise about their owners. How much of that do you think is to blame for their poor season, and how much of it is the players and the recruitment, the manager, etc.?
Well, there's definitely sort of it feels like there's a bad mood around the club. I mean, I went to the away game back in October, and he definitely sets sort of an ill feeling around the club. I think quite a lot of fans don't go anymore because of the owners. But as far as sort of on the pitch is concerned, sort of the impact of the owners hasn't been that much this season, I'd say. Everything they've sort of accused of before, sort of meddling too much, appointing foreign managers, signing random foreign players, they haven't really done this season. So in the summer, they appointed Russell Slade, who was sort of a good, respectable English manager. Then he let him sign good, respectable English players like Lee Novak, Nicky Adrose and Ricky Holmes. And when things didn't work out, they sacked him and they replaced him with Carl Robinson, who, again, another respectable English manager. So sort of what you'd expect, really. I think the main issue this season has really been just sort of a high level of squad turnover. So after getting relegated from the Championship, they got rid of a lot of players, and Russell Slade brought in a lot of new players. And then when Slade left and Robinson arrived, more players were cleared out, like Kevin Foley, and Robinson brought in his own players, sort of Jake Forster-Caskey, Nathan Byrne, and Lewis Page. So, and sort of this change from the style of play hasn't helped. So you've got Slade's football, which is, and then you've got Carl Robinson's football, sort of more, tries to be sort of more progressive and playing on the floor. So there's a big difference there. And also Carl Robinson has come out on quite a few occasions over the past few months, just absolutely tearing into the players. So it's sort of been more sort of bad management, sort of, and sort of poor planning of the squad, really.
I'm astonished to hear that hiring Russell Slade and having a high squad turnover hasn't worked for them. You mentioned Ricky Holmes as one of the players that he brought in. He's their top scorer this season on 10, I think. Is there anyone else we should possibly look out for?
Well, I'll start off with Ricky Holmes. The amazing thing with him is he's looked a real class apart this season. He sort of drifts past players, and he's just one of those wingers who just beats everyone so easily. He's really direct, and he's got a good goal return. But this is basically his first season in League One, and he's 30 years old. So it's a bit weird that he hasn't played at a higher level. Elsewhere, you got Nathan Byrne, who was really, really good for Swindon for a few years, then went up to the Championship and sort of didn't really do it. But he's been back on loan, and he's just a really quick winger. Basically, he can play at fullback. We've also got Jake Forster-Caskey, who I mentioned, who's sort of a playmaker in midfield. And then they've had Joe Aribo in midfield, who's broken through this season, sort of drives forward the ball, he's got good delivery, sort of can do a bit of... He's a bit of a winger, sort of attacking midfield sort of player. At the back, Charlton have got quite big centre-backs in Patrick Bauer and George Teixeira. We've also got Jason Pearce as well, who's a really good centre-back. Certainly a few seasons ago, he was really seen as sort of a really good Championship centre-back. So it was a real surprise to see him drop into League One this summer. And then this season, they've had Ezri Konsa, who's broken through and looked like a real class act. They reckon he might be off to sort of a Premier League club soon. He's sort of played everywhere really. He's played at centre-back, right-back and in midfield. And he's just been good wherever he's played. And in goal, they have Declan Rudd, who last season was playing in the Premier League for Norwich for about 5 or 6 games. So there's a lot of quality in the squad. It's just been a case of sort of trying to blend that all together, really.
It feels like Declan Rudd especially is slumming it to quite an extent. He was a kind of bottom-end Premier League goalkeeper, but certainly a passable Premier League goalkeeper for me.
Yeah, it might just be one of those things where sort of Norwich dropped into the Championship. They didn't want to loan him out to another Championship club, but they knew he needed game time, and I think they have 2 or 3 other goalkeepers at Norwich, so just sort of send them to League One basically.
Very good. So prediction?
I think we'll win this game, but I am wary of sort of Charlton having quite a lot of good players, but so do Peterborough.
Okay, and then Rochdale. So Rochdale are 9th at the moment. Now, a lot of people talk this season about our budget and whether it's the budget of a team that's challenging for the playoffs or whether it's one that should at very least not be bottom of League One. But I think Rochdale's is almost certainly lower than ours, but they're in 9th and again are sort of semi-challenging for the playoffs. How does Keith Hill do it? And why didn't he succeed at Barnsley, in your opinion?
I think he's someone who puts a lot of emphasis on sort of the overall system, sort of blending things together. He's good at sort of spotting the individual qualities of players and deciding where they best fit. So a lot of the time he'll play like strikers or wingers at fullback because they can get forward, or he'll play like a centre back in midfield because that's what the team needs. So he's very good at sort of identifying how players sort of fit into a system, sort of bringing in sort of few academy players and sort of real cast-offs from elsewhere and blending it all together. I think the problem for Hill with Barnsley is just the financial realities between like a bottom League One club and a big League One club are dwarfed by sort of that same comparison in the Championship. And also I think at Rochdale, Hill has benefited from having sort of a good group of players that have been together for quite a few years. And the squad's been relatively settled. I think they've only really sold Scott Hogan in recent years. And at Barnsley, you lost Ricardo Vaste and Craig Davis from a pretty decent first season. And you didn't really recover from that.
Okay, only 3 teams have scored more goals than Rochdale this season. What would you do to combat that?
Well, we saw when we last played them that they're a really good sort of pressing side. They sort of mix it up with sort of diagonal balls too. So there's sort of really good sort of choking teams when they're on their game. They've got good control in the middle too from Callum Counts and Jamie Allen, who are both really good players who come through their academy. But we also saw in that game that they are prone to the counter-attack. They don't have quick defenders really, and they don't really have defenders who are amazing on the ball. So I'd sort of basically replicate that plan, although I remember that game being very sort of riding on the seat of our pants there. We were really lucky to win that game. But yeah, sort of a similar setup, but hopefully not conceding as many chances as we did in that last game.
Finally then, your prediction for the game, and overall, do you think they will make the playoffs?
I think we will lose the game 2-0. I don't think Rochdale will make the playoffs. They were on the verge of the playoffs sort of on halfway point of the season, but since the turn of the year, they've been actually pretty poor. I think their form sort of since January is one of, I think it's sort of bottom 5 or 6 in the league, so not doing that well. And I saw on the BBC website today that Keith Hill was saying they had a losing mentality. So I don't think they've got the momentum to make the playoffs, it seems.
Great stuff. Give us a reminder of the website address for your blog before you leave us.
Okay, it's sidewayssammy.wordpress.com.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, on to listener questions then. So we will start with a question from Callum Fuller that I'm going to ask Neil to answer. Given how great Biggie has been recently, how do you rate our chances of keeping him next season, and would you make him captain?
I think I'd probably make him captain if we kept him. I think he's that kind of guy who cares so much and kind of is sort of always keen to G everybody else up. I think we'll keep hold of him. The thing about it is, if the good game that he had wasn't in that final, I don't think we would be talking about there being any issue about keeping him next season, because I think bottom of the table midfielder for us, kind of having a couple of good games near the end of the season, is going to go under the radar. I think the fact that he had that good game in front of the cameras may give someone might want to take a punt on him because it's Biggie and he's got Premier League experience. But I'm feeling fairly confident that we'll keep hold of him, and I probably would make the upgrade. I just feel like he's probably more my kind of captain.
Paul, thoughts?
Yeah, I can't see him going anywhere. By the sounds of it, he was a bit disillusioned under Russell Slade, which, doesn't separate him from the rest of the Col fans. But, I think if Robbins is in charge, he seems like the sort of player who Robbins could do something with. He seems a bit more confident. So we got to replace him with someone better if we get rid of him, and I don't see that happening that easily. So
I think
I'll keep him.
I think the interesting thing will be if someone comes in for him, because he should be looking to, if he stays, captain or otherwise, he should be looking to be one of, if not the best player in League Two. And I think it'll be a real test of how good he actually is. I think I'm still of the opinion that he's probably better than he is, because I like him, and every so often he has an absolutely brilliant game. But I think if he doesn't end up being one of the absolute better players in League Two, I think, what is he? But I don't know. Anyway, next question.
And the other thing with Biggie, I know, go back to stats, which are always quite interesting. Biggie, when Biggie hasn't played, we've only actually won 3 times this season. When he has played, we've won 13.
That's incredible, really.
Yeah, I mean, when he started, 13 wins, 5 draws, 13 defeats. When he hasn't played, 3 wins, 9 draws, 12 defeats. So, I mean, again, all the caveats in the world, we do appear to be a better team with him in the team, but I don't know why I'm fucking looking at stats. That's clearly evidence for anyone who's watched us play this season. But it feels like he's had a really stop-start season, because he didn't really start the season in the team. He was then in the team, and then obviously your sort of most recent recollections are of Callum Riley and Foley in midfield. So, it seems ridiculous that Biggie has only really recently got back into the team.
That is did you just conjure that statistic off the top of your head by any chance?
Did I? Fuck, I looked on the internet like everyone else did. But it is a bit like the Ruben Ramirez one, where we've won more games when he's, when Ruben starts, our record with him in the team is better. It's like 7 wins, 7 draws, and 5 defeats against like some other 9 wins and 20 defeats or something. And you're like, well, but you watch them play, and you're like, I don't need stats to tell me that we're a better team when Biggie's in the team, or we might be slightly better when. And it's all about, and the guys sort of, it's not me saying that Biggie's the best player in the world. It's just when you look at the alternatives, it's a bit like Kyle Reid. I'm not saying Kyle Reid's the best left winger in the world, but he's possibly the best left winger at our club. So when you play strikers on the left wing instead of Carl Reed, or you play Marcus Tudgay as a number 10 instead of Ruben Ramirez, or you play Kevin Foley in midfield instead of Biggie Romana, you're likely to lose more often because they're worse players than the player they're keeping out. So that's what I was saying about Biggie. So I've sort of gone through a bit up and down with Biggie, but I don't think he's going to be that easy to replace, as you say, with a better player. Because you look at him and you're like, you should be tearing League One, like League Two apart. You should be going out onto the pitch every week going, I'm one of the best players, if not the best central midfielder in this division.
The problem is when he plays poorly, he's an easy sacrifice, like Ramirez, and that's what I feel like. It's sort of that panic that sets in. If we lose a game where they're in the team, the easy decision from a managerial point of view is to say, okay, well, I'm not going to put Ramirez in the next game. I'm not going to put someone tall and big in this team because at least it feels dependable. And I mean, that in my mind is a myth. If you're a good player, you're a good player. You can still lose games. And it's kind of too easy to get rid of someone like Ramirez and put in Tudgay, and you feel a bit more secure in that. And I don't, and that's the issue. So when you look at those stats, they do ring true because it's kind of they play, we win some games, you keep them in the team. Then when we lose that one game, they're kind of the go-to four guys, and I'm going to take out Ramirez now. And then he's not in the team for a few more games while we try and figure out how best to address it. And it's bonkers really when you look at them as sort of their quality more than anything else. It is there for you to see. It's just because they're small, and you can tell I've got a gripe with that. It's not fair.
Okay, next question. Any thoughts on Tommy Woodrington being brought in as lead of player recruitment, which happened today? It's a question from Talbot Sky Blue 83 on Twitter. Paul, head of lead of player recruitment?
So, you want to keep this short, and this is too long a question, really. I mean, in short, someone recently on Twitter was like, we're a selling club. And it's like, we are a selling club. Everyone's a selling club. But what you have to be is a decent buying club, because every club, apart from like 3 or 4 in the world, has to sell their players. What you need to do then is recruit wisely. And one thing, again, let's point at the obvious one, Yakubu. It's a waste of money and waste of time. We all knew that when he signed, and then we released him 6 weeks later. We get through so many players. Kevin Foley's another one. We don't need Kevin Foley. I agree with Neil. He wasn't that bad on Saturday, but he didn't have a winger up against him. He didn't have anything to do on Saturday, so he looked all right. But you're looking at it like, he's no better than Dion Kelly-Evans. When he was playing centre midfield, he was fucking garbage. But he's played 10 games for us. That's 10 games. We didn't need Kevin Foley to play. Then that's one of the things we need to start getting right. You look. Sorry, I'm going to very quick tangent. You look at the starting 11 on Saturday. Half of those players were either not at the club or not in the starting 11 at the start of the season. We do this every year. We just have this fucking churn of 30, 40 players, and that has to, if we're going to progress, if we're going to move forward, we have to stop that. We have to stop having players for the sake of having players. And if this guy comes in and we start recruiting wisely and we stop wasting time on shit footballers, then I'm all for it. I think that's what the club needs. The club desperately needs someone with a long-term player strategy.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing will be, I don't know to what extent at our level you're better off having a manager who is a coach and then having a strategy for player recruitment where the manager almost, to a certain extent, has to kind of do something with what he's given. Does that make sense? So that you don't end up with a situation where Russell Slade is able to come in and bring in 7 players and then he's sacked 10 weeks later, and then all of a sudden you've got another manager who comes in and just goes, these players are crap, what am I meant to do with them?
Well, the problem was, the rumours are true, which I think we have to assume the rumours, there isn't a scouting system. There isn't, from what we understand, when Presley was here, he had a scout, and then when he left, he took all the names with him. So, to some extent, if I was going to give Slade any benefit of the doubt, is he did what managers like him do, where he's gone and went, I need a centre-half. I've worked with Nathan Clark before. He's not in the Bradford first team. Therefore, I will get him because I know I can get him. Instead of going, I need a centre-half, who's the best centre-half I can get? He's just gone, who's a centre-half I know that I can get? But from what you hear around the club, the lack of scouting, that's the situation we find ourselves in. So, again, if we're going to give kudos to Mark Robins, if he's come in and said, look, player recruitment is one of our biggest weaknesses, and I think Tim Fisher might have said something similar to that in his last radio or interview.
And he said it
then
again today.
Then it's time, at least that's something they're trying to sort out. At least it's another tick in the box of things that are wrong with the club. How easy is that to solve? We appoint someone to start sorting it out. Tick with doing that. Let's build on that.
Neil?
So, as long as he keeps the title lead of player recruitment, because I prefer that to scout. I just feel like the job of scout's a bloody joke. You go and watch football matches and you pick out some players who play well in those games, and that's it. They all play well. You always get a few good players. Doesn't mean they're worthy sort of players for you, or they're going to play well any longer than that. Especially at this level, they'll only go and watch a player one game, and then I want that job basically. I want to be a scout. It seems bloody easy. But as for him, I'd prefer a strategy-led approach. So as long as he's coming in and he's understanding he's overseeing more of the sort of churn of players, as Paul put it, then I think that makes more sense, because we need to cease this sort of endless nature of bringing in players just for like 3-4 week periods. It's ridiculous.
It's also possible that he is just a scout, but that's what he's put on his LinkedIn profile.
I still prefer it. Yeah.
Then final question from Tom Alves. So George Thomas, if we keep him for next year, would we play him out wide or up front? I feel like we've done this a little bit recently.
Yeah, haven't we?
And I think that was, we covered that a bit last week, didn't we? I think most of us are pretty well set with him being out wide.
He can play it out wide. I think ultimately he's going to be a striker, though. That's my feelings on the subject. I don't think there's any issue with being out wide, and he can fill that role adequately. But if Robins is preparing a team that's going to do a job next year, I can't see him having George Thomas as his number one out on the wing. It doesn't feel kind of natural to me.
What do you think you'd want on? Remember that the last time he was here, he had Carl Baker, who
was a winger,
pass win but would score.
He played right wing his whole career. He was a right winger.
That's fine, but I think, we're going over wrong. I think George Thomas's runs and the way he uses the ball, just if he's going to keep Bevan, which Bevan's turning me around. I had issues with Bevan, but I think he wasn't helped again by our friend Slade, who just didn't know what the fuck he was doing with Bevan. You think he knew he wanted Bevan, but he didn't know what the fuck he was going to do with him. I mean, to be fair to Robins, we're no longer just chucking the ball in the general direction of our front three or final third and just going, run, Bevan, run. There's a bit more, we're trying to play to his feet. We're trying to actually involve players in and around him now. So I can, Bevan, I think there is a player there you could use next season. Therefore, I think if you're going with him up front, I see George Thomas getting around 10, 15 goals from right midfield. I'm not bothered if he can't track back. I'm assuming no left back in League Two's Gareth Bale. So I think having another striker on the wing in this instance and the type of player he is, I think that's probably quite a good thing.
I go back to our redundancy of attacking formations conversation from a couple of years ago, and just think, mate, I think there was two managers played each other recently in the Premier League, and they both talked about it post game about how we're desperate to put shapes on everything when often there aren't. And I wonder whether actually we're on split purposes here, and whether he is effectively just a forward, and whether that means that he occupies a position that is nominally on the right and cuts inside, or whether he's very forward and central, whether they're really all that different. Or, do you know what I mean, in terms of outcome? Actually,
yeah, I mean, it's very much, you use the McSheffrey analogy the other week, and I think that's probably most appropriate for him, where he's just he's positioned himself on that right hand side, but he's looking to impact stuff going forward, and he's attacking and all this sort of stuff. I mean, my point around sort of why I don't think he will be on the right is just that if Robins this summer is setting out to develop this sort of his idea of the perfect shape for us, and he's not going to get the perfect team, but if he's looking at how is he going to sort of craft this unit that's going to get us promoted next year, while I think George Thomas will always be in his mind as an option on the right wing, I just don't think that if he was to go through and say, right, I've got an opportunity now to build my team, I don't feel like he would say, right, first choice, George Thomas on my right. If he's playing 4-4-2, if he would do that. He may do if he's thinking more in sort of this attacking, just going to have a bunch of four people up front and they're kind of going to be nominally in these positions. But if he's going positionally, like right wing, left wing, all that sort of stuff, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into my idea of what George Thomas is, but I just don't see it.
Will be interesting to see either way. Do we have any final thoughts before we pack up?
Checking me down this weekend then. Checking that's it.
I'm not sure because I kind of feel like we'll beat Charlton. I don't know what the permutations are that would see us go down. I'm assuming that we could win and go down this weekend, can't we? Or on Saturday, on Friday.
We can win every game and go down, yeah. Bury on Thursday night are playing Rochdale at home. Rochdale, who I think lost to Shrewsbury at the weekend. Chesterfield are at home to Southend, but even if Chesterfield win, that doesn't really, just means we can't catch them.
Yeah.
Gillingham have got Bristol Rovers, who are just outside the playoffs, and from what I understand, Gillingham are a shower of shit at the moment. Port Vale have got Sheffield United. They're now promoted. Is that going to be after the Lawmere show? And Shrewsbury are playing Walsall. My fear about Walsall is they're a bit like Peterborough, where they've literally got nothing to play for.
Yeah.
And you could sort of see that with 10 minutes to go, you were like, oh, let's wait for the Peterborough onslaught. Oh, they don't care. Woohoo!
And you can see that from Walsall's results as well recently. I don't think they've won in about 5 games or something like that.
No. So I think, as I said, because some of these teams only really need a point or, a win, I think all the teams who could send us down have got home games against teams that if we were playing them this Friday, I'd be convinced we were going to beat. So I wouldn't be surprised if we went down this week, even though we'll beat Charlton.
I think
it'd be so funny if we came to next week and we're still up. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think it'll be this weekend, won't it? Given that we've got 2 games this weekend, but yeah, who knows?
Plus, we've only won once away all season, so we're going to have to sort of win. Well, we're going to have to obviously win 2 away games. So
bad pass. I mean,
Rochdale,
is that right?
Rochdale are beatable.
Well,
if it came to it on Monday.
I think they're 6 points outside the playoffs, aren't they? With 4 games left. I think realistically their hopes are dashed. But there we go. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, fabulous. If you want to get in touch with us, it's at Neil Lamptey Show on Twitter, or it's neillampteyshow@gmail.com. Thank you, Paul.
Cheers, buddy.
And thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening. Bye.